Welcome to The Stream. I'm Rochelle Carey, standing in for Femi Yoki. People across Zambia this week are going to the polls in a tense general election dominated by two presidential candidates. As incumbent Edgar Lungu and main challenger Hakainde Hichilema bid for victory, we ask, how will the outcome of this vote affect Zambia's future? That is our question today. If you're on YouTube, you can send us your comments and questions for our live discussion. We'd love for you to be part of this conversation. So joining us for this conversation, Haru Matassa. She is Al Jazeera's Africa correspondent and is in Zambia's capital, Lusaka. Anthony Bwala is spokesperson for presidential candidate Hakainde Hichilema and the opposition United Party for National Development. Also in Lusaka, getting some last-minute notes there, I can see. And completing our lineup from the Zambian capital, we have Amos Chanda. He's a political spokesperson for the ruling Patriotic Front led by the president, Edgar Lungu. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it. Haru, I'm going to start with you. Does this have a feel of a close election? How would you describe what the atmosphere has been since you've been in country?
Well, I think Zambia, for me, it's one of those weird experiences where you arrive in a country and partly because of COVID-19, where people aren't really allowed to openly come out and campaign as much as they would like to, you're not really feeling that election fever on the ground. I mean, you're seeing some posters here and there, you're seeing some people campaigning, but it doesn't feel like some of the other elections I felt before. But that said, when you do speak to people one-on-one on the ground, they'll tell you they feel that there's something different about this election. They feel that things do seem a little bit close. It could be a tight race. Lots of issues on people's minds, of course, the main one being the economy. And people are just watching to see what happens on Thursday when they go to the vote and what the outcome is going to be. A big concern for most ordinary Zambians is, will there be post-election violence once the results are announced? And if whoever loses doesn't accept the result?
What do you see? Are there police? Are there army? Is there any type of presence like that you're seeing?
Well, President Edgar Lungu ordered the deployment of the military a few days ago. This is after the ruling party said two of its supporters were killed. The opposition have also said their supporters have also been either injured and killed as well. So there is that tension on the ground. But what I've seen, I mean, I've driven around and you don't really see the army on the ground. You see one or two here and there, but they aren't like visibly present. But people know they are around. They know they can be dispatched if they need to be. So that does kind of sort of heighten the tension a little bit. But I mean, like I said, if you arrive today or tomorrow and you drive around, unless there is obvious tension and violence on the ground, you're not going to see a big, heavy presence of the military at the moment.
So, Haru, as I said, you've been in country, you've been doing some reporting. I want to play something for our viewers and for our other guests to see. There has been some violence. There has been some loss of life. It's been deeply painful for some people. So I want to play a little bit of a report that you've already sent to us, and then we'll circle back on the other side.
Daniel Kasongo's family got a phone call telling them to rush to the hospital. When they got there, his body was in the morgue. He supported Zambia's ruling Patriotic Front and was out campaigning for President Edgar Lungu when he was killed. His relatives and friends say he was killed by opposition supporters. Across town, another family is devastated. Miriam Chiseba's husband, Joram, belonged to the opposition party UPND. He was putting up campaign posters when he was killed with a machete, allegedly by backers of the ruling party.
It hurts. The way he died was cruel. I now have to look after the children by myself. I don't know what I'm going to do or how I'm going to manage without him.
Haru, does that, when you see what the violence does to people and the pain that it causes, are you seeing that this makes people more determined to go to the polls, or does this scare some people?
People seem determined to go to the polls, but yes, it does scare some people. I mean, even in that report, speaking to those two families from the ruling party and the opposition, when you ask them, when you approach them, to tell their story or to give their name or can we show their face, it wasn't that easy to convince them to go on the record and tell their stories, because both sides were saying, what if someone sees me, doesn't like what I say, and they come after me or my family? There is that subtle tension on the ground. But that said, I can't explain it. Someone said to me that this feels like 1991, when multi-party democracy was ushered in, Kenneth Kaunda stepped down, and it was a new phase for the country. People feel there's a bit of that happening. We don't know if that's going to happen or not, but there's a feel that something is different about this election. Of course, we only know when people go to vote and we see who they vote for. But yes, I can say it's a tense calm and an easy calm on the ground, a lot of hope, a lot of optimism, but of course that concern that if whoever loses this election doesn't accept the result, what's going to be the way forward for the country?
Amos, how would you describe the atmosphere right now? What would you like the world to see about the atmosphere in Zambia as this election is so close?
Exactly what Aru has seen when she has been on the streets of Lusaka, the complete, real, different picture from that which is portrayed as tense, chaotic, or something that shows that the country is ungovernable with regards to the deployment of the army reinforcement of security. What I would want to say that the world must see Zambia for what it is. When you are on the streets of Lusaka, you can't see the army, but the deployment is meant to enhance that security. So we want people to see Zambia for what it is, a country with a strong established democratic tradition, that an atmosphere exists for a sufficiently free and fair election to take place. And this is what the president is committing to, that not a single life is worth losing for election, which is why his number one priority is security and stability of the country. And in any case, if there is no peace and stability, it is not possible for a free and fair election to occur. So far, what we are seeing now, regrettably, those lives being lost, but after that, what we are seeing now is that an atmosphere for a free and fair election exists.
Okay,
strong democratic tested institutions of governance are in place to conduct a free and fair election.
So, Anthony, okay, Anthony, do you feel like the scene has been set for a free and fair election? Do you agree with what Amos is describing?
Well, thank you very much. And I think let's be clear, Zambia and the Zambian people themselves have quite a lot of things to be proud of. And top of that list probably is a long-standing culture and tradition of peace that we have been enjoying for so many years, and thanks to the sacrifice and the hard work of several generations of citizens in this country. And for us, in many respects, this election is about continuing with that tradition of peace, but this time by way of delivering broader social and economic justice for the 18 million Zambians who, in many respects, feel shortchanged and hard done by the past 10 years of what has been a diabolical failure of leadership in this country. So broadly speaking, the situation or the election atmosphere in Zambia at the moment is calm in the sense that Zambians are generally peace-loving, and that we are all committed and determined to ensuring that we go through this election peacefully, as Amos has indicated. We all generally agree that not a single life should be lost, no blood should be shed for purposes of an election. But the atmosphere is also tense in the sense that you will understand that Zambians, broadly speaking, have reached consensus that the past 10 years have not worked for ordinary citizens, and therefore there is an urgent need for us to deliver a change of government. But the lack of confidence in the hearts of minds of citizens in and around the ability for the incumbent regime to deliver an atmosphere that will ensure a free and fair election is contributing to an atmosphere of uncertainty and tense in a sense, because our citizens do not have the confidence that we have all the conditions necessary for the delivery of a free and fair election, but yes, generally peaceful.
So
tense at the same
I
time.
think the tension has been taken away by the assurance by the president, and not just by speech, but in action, that first of all, you've got to have a free and fair election only when conditions of peace exist. And then I think that we think that the taking away of violence from the political
But Amos, I want to
assure us.
Amos, let me just get in here for just a second. I want to put something to you that's in a report from what Amnesty has said. Amnesty International has said, this is a quote, this is what we have seen in Zambia, especially in the past 5 years, is an increasingly brutal crackdown on human rights characterized by brazen attacks on any form of dissent. So you're describing peace, but peace at what cost? What are the measures that you're using to maintain this so-called peace?
If you look at the Zambian parliament, for instance, as a measure, if there is a brutal crackdown on dissent, it's one of the most vibrant parliaments, probably in the entire Africa. You have a very vibrant opposition that is able to stop a constitutional bill from passing into law. To achieve that, you need a very vibrant civil society that lobbies against a government position, and it succeeds.
Okay, Amos,
that moved on.
Okay, that's actually a good point you're making. We have someone from the opposition here. Anthony, do you feel that way?
Look, I think it's disingenuous and misleading to narrow conditions of a free and fair election purely to one single aspect of peace. We have always indicated, and I think as the report by Amnesty International, and not just by Amnesty International, there have been several reports that have been issued within the country by several civil society groupings, which points to precisely the same points which Amnesty International have raised. Yes, peace we do enjoy, but the amount of brutality when it comes to cracking down on the opposition is unfathomable. It is something that is unprecedented, never seen in the history of this country. The civil society, which Amos refers to as being free to lobby against government bills, they are on the record human rights defenders. They have been dragged to courts merely for attempting to stage not even a protest, but a public gathering outside of parliament. In this country, it is practically illegal to stage a protest. So, on the records, they're going to tell you that.
Wait a moment, just a moment, gentlemen, just a moment. So we have a lot of viewers that are watching on YouTube too that are really tuned in, particularly to this aspect of the conversation. We have someone, Jabesa Zulu, who says, this is the most unfair elections in the history of my lifetime. Opposition parties are not allowed to campaign freely in the ruling party's strongholds. We have a lot of comments to that effect, and a question very specifically from Leah Kawamba has a question for Mr. Chanda. In your opinion, what makes this 2021 election free and fair? And then we're going to pivot to some of the issues with the economy in a moment, but I want you to answer that, Amos.
Yes, what makes it unfair? Because the conditions exist for the opposition to campaign. Of course, it's a COVID election, as we are calling it, as it impacted the ruling party in a manner that this is not how we designed the campaign. We have had to move it almost 360 degrees from how we do the campaign to the digital platforms. The reason why you don't see the ruling party making as much noise as the opposition does is that we do have a recognition that as a party that has formed the government that is in place, we do have a greater responsibility than the opposition has. If we are told by the public health director in one region of the country not to move, you won't see us going to the media and cry about that. We suffer inside. But because the opposition do not have that burden of responsibility that we have, you hear more about, I think, restrictions on everybody. We, as a social democratic movement, the Patriotic Front, we like to talk to people when we are campaigning. We want a festival.
Amos, I'm going to step in for just a moment, just because we're having a tiny bit of a technical issue with you. So while we get that straight, I actually want to go to you, Heru. So everyone has referenced COVID. And what we see is that the number of COVID cases in Zambia is about 200,000. That's a high number. And about 3,500 deaths. Have people said to you that they feel that the COVID restrictions have gotten in the way unfairly, that they've been weaponized in any way to keep people from being able to organize? Have you heard any frustration like that from voters?
Not yet, not at the moment. What I've picked up is that people are concerned about COVID-19, but they also realize that there is an election and some kind of campaigning has to go ahead. So they're trying to balance the two, and I'm talking about opposition and ruling party. What we've seen, though, although officially campaigns have been banned, but what you see some of these people doing, for example, the opposition, sometimes the ruling party as well, they have what they call whistle-stop rallies, where they go into an area and they say they're handing out masks because of COVID-19 to sensitize the public. But then, of course, they then turn into political rallies. Interestingly enough, President Edgar Lungu today, on Monday, was at the airport where he officially opened the new international airport, which was built by China, and all the money that he's borrowed. And that's why the country's, well, one of the reasons why the country's so much in debt. And hundreds of ruling party supporters were there. There was no social distancing. Some of them weren't wearing masks. So, I mean, officially, there is this thing that COVID-19, be careful, no campaigning, et cetera, but we've seen both parties and other political parties as well, sometimes, I suppose, breaking the so-called law to campaign ahead of these elections.
You know, you brought up the airport and money from China. That's a perfect segue into the conversation that we need to have about the economy and debt, and how much debt that the country actually has. So that's the broader issue. But before we get to that, I want to play something from some people in Zambia and how they feel about the economy very specifically and how it's affecting them. Let's listen to that.
So Zambia heads to the polls in the next few days with a $19 billion debt hanging over their heads. The debt has ballooned as a result of the government's appetite to borrow and spend. Recently, the government defaulted in its payments and earned itself a near junk status C rating, affecting the confidence of citizens and business alike.
And looking at the needs for the people of Zambia ahead of these elections, one of the most important things they want to see is how the economy is going to stabilize, because looking at the currency kwacha over the past few years, it has depreciated a great deal, losing value, hence making it hard for the people of Zambia to afford a meal on their tables.
Zambian people, especially those urban poor, and the middle class income earners in the cities are hoping to turn this election around and try to secure their lives now and the future of their kids.
So you talked about the debt, the loans that are coming in from China, Haru. Yeah, it'll get you great, wonderful things like airports, but what does it really mean for somebody who needs to get food on the table? What is it that you're hearing from people about how frustrated they are about inflation, high unemployment, and how the economy just is not stabilized?
Well, this is something very strange. When I landed here, I mean, I was last in Zambia about 5 or 6 years ago. And when I landed in Lusaka, I mean, you're amazed at the infrastructure development, the roads, the bridges. I mean, this new airport looks fantastic. I mean, I'm from a country, Zimbabwe, where we think that in terms of infrastructure development, we're better off than some of the countries in SADC in the region. And I was like amazed by how far Zambia seems to have gotten. And then I spoke to a young mother who was going shopping today for the basics, you know, bread, milk, cooking oil. And she says that because the economy is so bad, like inflation is high, salaries aren't going up as well, so people are struggling. She's had to cut back on luxuries for her and her son. And she's saying that she's seeing all this great development, the nice roads, the nice buildings, but she can't eat roads. She can't eat this big fancy airport. So that's the frustration lots of people have at the moment, trying to balance it to where they see, to some extent, the ruling party, the president, putting all these developments, but then the country is in so much debt. It means the government can't provide certain services for the poor, for many Zambians on the ground. And ultimately, their money that they're earning is literally not enough for them to make ends meet. There is frustration from, I think, many Zambians from all political parties on that front when it comes to the economy.
So, Amos, what about that? What does your party owe the people besides fancy new airports?
Those are prerequisite to development. The one point that the PF government recognized 2011 when we came into power is that the dilapidated infrastructure, whether it's road, water networks, airports, was impacting on development, as it were. That 3 million Zambians were being treated to a power infrastructure that's remained stagnant for 40 years. So we have had to put 750 megawatts of power because there's been an expansion in industry, mining, whether it's center pivot. So you got to invest in power infrastructure. You have got to invest in airports, deep tanks. There's been an expansion in wheat growing in Zambia, tobacco, and all those things are powered by energy, center pivots. You cannot have a public infrastructure that does not correlate with the population. There are only two ways of raising money, whether at the personal level or national level at a business. It's either debt or equity. If you don't have equity, you've got to go into debt. If that debt is invested in production rather than consumption, there is absolutely nothing wrong. The government now, 2021, 2026, is moving into the micro situation of household food security, income levels for the people. Actually, you can eat roads because there was a story in this country that is bumper harvest that is followed by wastage because people couldn't take the produce to the market in good time.
All right. No, Amos, you are making the case for why infrastructure is important. Obviously it is, and I certainly did not imply to be dismissive, didn't mean to seem dismissive of that. But Anthony, does what Amos is saying, does this ring true to you, the things that he's saying that are important, and does his government deserve more time to get this done? Or do you think that people are going to say time is up and that something will actually be different for your candidate who has actually run 6 times already?
Look, you cannot argue against infrastructure development because that is indeed a principal component and requirement for economic development. But what you can argue against, and what we continue to argue against in this case, number one, has been the manner in which public debt has been contracted. A huge portion of this public debt, $23 billion, which our colleagues in government have spent, contracted after 2016, was contracted illegally without parliamentary approval. The Republican Constitution is very clear. All public debt needs to be approved by Parliament. And a huge portion contracted after 2016 was never taken to Parliament for approval. Then secondly, they opted for expensive commercial debt when they had options for concessional financing from bilateral.
Anthony, if I can stop you for, I just want to stop you for let me stop you for 1 second. Let me stop you for 1 second. I understand your candidate is a businessman and that you're talking in terms that way, but does the average person, how does what you say actually resonate with the average person who just wants to be able to afford the same groceries they could afford last year?
So you have talked about how poverty has crept into millions of households in this country.
And I think we just, oh goodness, Anthony Bwala's signal just froze there.
Yes.
All right. Amos, that doesn't mean you get Anthony's time. Anthony, and we just lost. I appreciate what you were trying to do there, Amos, but no. Anthony, are you back?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay.
So the poverty that you're seeing in Zambia at the moment is a direct consequence of the huge amount of money that which government has borrowed now cannot pay back, because now government's focus is on servicing and paying back this debt rather than pumping money into productive areas of the economy, such as agriculture, job creation, education, and public health care. You can imagine next year, the $750 million Eurobond is due. And the government at the moment just does not have the ability to pay back that money. So whereas we need to be focusing on investing in productive sectors of the economy itself is not in a state where it will be able to regenerate or generate enough local revenue to be able to support those productive sectors of the economy. And this is why we keep on making the point that there will never be a path to growth and prosperity for an ordinary Zambian if we do not answer and resolve the critical question of how these our colleagues in government have borrowed this.
All right, Anthony. Anthony, that's going to have to be the final word. That's going to have to be the final word. Heru, Anthony, Amos, thank you very much for joining us for this conversation. We'll be covering this throughout the week leading up to the vote. You can always find us online if you go to aljazeera.com. Thank you for joining us.